The schoolhouse in Cedar Falls smelled like chalk dust and yesterday's disappointment. Evelyn Hart stood at the blackboard, her back straight as a rifle barrel, writing conjugations for students who'd rather be anywhere else. 23 years old when she'd started this job. 32 now. 9 years of other people's children, other people's futures. Miss Hart? Little Jenny Rollins raised her hand, gap-toothed and earnest. My mama says you're getting married soon. The classroom went silent. 12 pairs of eyes locked onto Evelyn like she was a specimen under glass. She didn't turn around, kept writing. I am. You are. He is. Your mama's mistaken, Jenny. But she said Mr. Patterson from the Mercantile was courting you proper this time. This time. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Evelyn set down the chalk, turned to face her students with the same calm expression she'd worn through every humiliation this town had served her. Mr. Patterson and I have concluded our acquaintance. Please open your readers to page 47. The children obeyed, but their whispers followed her like shadows. She'd heard them all before, too tall, too plain, too educated for her own good. What man wants a wife who's read more books than he has? She'd stopped correcting them around rejection number 3. When the final bell rang, Evelyn dismissed her students and began erasing the board with mechanical precision. The door creaked open behind her. Evelyn? She didn't need to turn. George Patterson's voice carried the particular tone of a man who'd rehearsed his speech, probably in front of a mirror. Mr. Patterson. I wanted to explain. No need. She faced him now, dustcloth in hand. He was a good man, by Cedar Falls standards. Clean, successful, kind enough when it suited him. You've made your position clear. His face reddened. It's not that you're not... That is, you're a fine woman, Evelyn, smart as a whip, but my mother, she's concerned about your mother's comfort. I know. Evelyn smiled without warmth. It's always something, isn't it? Last time it was my height. Before that, my tendency toward masculine opinions. Mr. Brennan didn't appreciate my views on land reform. Mr. Cooper found my reading habits unseemly. Mr. Walsh simply said I'd never learn to be properly grateful. George shifted his weight, hat crushed between nervous hands. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Am I? She moved past him toward her desk, began gathering papers. I thought I was making it easier, saving you the trouble of pretending there's something wrong with you instead of what's actually wrong, which is that I'm not the kind of woman who apologizes for existing. That right there. He pointed at her, accusation in the gesture. That's exactly what I mean. What man wants to come home to that kind of intelligence, honesty? Evelyn's voice stayed level, but something sharp glinted beneath it. Self-respect? George jammed his hat back on. I came here to let you down easy, Evelyn, to be decent about it. How generous. He left without another word. The schoolhouse door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Evelyn stood alone in the empty classroom, surrounded by small desks and children's mistakes, and allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of stillness. Not grief. She'd stopped grieving these losses around rejection number 2. Just exhaustion. She was tired of being wrong by virtue of being herself. The walk home took 15 minutes through streets where everyone knew her story. Mrs. Chen at the boarding house nodded sympathetically. The butcher's wife looked away. 3 women outside the general store stopped talking as she passed, then resumed in whispers sharp enough to draw blood. Her room was small. Narrow bed, simple desk, trunk with everything she owned. On the wall, a framed teaching certificate and nothing else. No photographs, no mementos. Just the certificate declaring her qualified to educate children in a town that tolerated her employment but would never quite accept her existence. Evelyn sat at her desk and pulled out the newspaper she'd hidden beneath her lesson plans. Montana Gazette. Personal advertisements. She'd been reading them for 3 weeks now, shame burning in her chest each time. Desperate women did desperate things, and apparently she'd finally crossed that threshold. Most of the advertisements were predictable. Seeking refined lady for companionship and homemaking. Translation. Ornament required, thinking optional. Widower needs gentle soul to mother his children. Translation. Unpaid servant wanted, affection negotiable. But one advertisement was different. She'd read it so many times the words had burned into her memory. Seeking, capable woman for contractual arrangement, No romance, no false expectations. Must be healthy, literate, and willing to relocate to Montana Territory. Purpose: air production and household management. Compensation, security, housing, medical care, and financial provision. This is a business transaction. Respond only if able to maintain emotional boundaries and fulfill agreed terms. Write to C. Maddox, Silver Creek Ranch, Montana Territory. Evelyn had laughed the first time she read it. The audacity, the cold brutality of air production, like she was livestock. But she'd kept reading it. Because buried in that clinical language was something none of the other men had offered: honesty. No pretense of courtship, no performance of romance that would inevitably fail when she proved too much of whatever women weren't supposed to be. Just terms. Structure. A transaction where both parties knew exactly what they were trading. She pulled out paper and began to write. Mr. Maddox, I am responding to your advertisement seeking a contractual arrangement. I understand this is not a romantic proposition, and I have no romantic expectations. Facts about my situation. I am 32 years old, employed as a school teacher in Cedar Falls. I have been engaged 5 times. Each arrangement ended due to my being deemed unsuitable for various reasons. Too independent, too educated, too forthright. I do not view these as failures on my part. I can read, write, manage accounts, teach, cook adequately, and handle the basic requirements of frontier life. I have no family, no debts, and no romantic attachments. I am healthy according to the town physician. What I want: a child of my own, a home that cannot be taken from me, security that doesn't depend on male approval of my personality. What I can offer: capability, honesty, and fulfillment of whatever terms you specify. I will not love you, but I will honor our agreement. I will not expect affection, but I will demand respect. If these terms are acceptable, please respond with travel arrangements and contract specifications. Sincerely, Evelyn Hart. She sealed the letter before courage could abandon her, addressed it with hands that barely shook, and walked it to the post office before doubt could set in. 3 weeks passed. Evelyn taught her classes, endured the town's whispered pity, and tried not to check the mail every day like some pathetic, hopeful girl. She'd almost convinced herself the whole thing was foolish when the telegram arrived. Mrs. Chen brought it up to her room personally, eyes wide with curiosity, barely restrained. "Come for you, Miss Hart, all the way from Montana Territory." Evelyn's hands trembled as she opened it. Evelyn Hart. Stop terms acceptable. Stop investigating your background as agreed. Stop. Preliminary approval granted. Stop. Stand by for travel arrangements. Stop. C. Maddox. The paper crumpled slightly in her grip. He was investigating her. Of course he was. This was business. A second telegram arrived 4 days later. Investigation complete. Stop your rejections noted and considered favorable. Stop. A woman men find difficult is a woman who thinks, stop exactly what I need. Stop. Accept full terms question. Stop. Respond immediately. Stop. Evelyn read it 3 times. Your rejections noted and considered favorable. Something cracked open in her chest. Not hope, exactly. Something more dangerous than that. Recognition. She sent her reply within the hour. Accepted. The final telegram came the next morning. Accepted. Stop travel immediately. Stop. Ticket enclosed. Cedar Falls to Silver Creek. Stop. Bring essentials only. Stop. Contract upon arrival. Stop. No romance. Stop. No expectations beyond terms. Stop. Cole Maddox. Stop. The train ticket was real. Heavy paper stock. Paid in full. Cedar Falls to Billings to Silver Creek Station. 3 days of travel into territory she'd only read about in newspapers. Wild country, where the law was whatever men with guns said it was. Evelyn stared at the ticket for a long time. This was insane. Traveling alone to meet a man who'd advertised for a woman like she was a piece of equipment. Agreeing to bear a child for someone who explicitly didn't want her affection. Trading one kind of captivity for another. But was it really worse than staying here? Teaching children who'd grow up to pity her? In a town where every year made her more invisible, more irrelevant, More proof that women who didn't fit the mold deserved whatever loneliness they got. At least Cole Maddox was honest about what he wanted from her. That was more than any other man had ever offered. She gave her notice at the school the next morning. The headmaster barely concealed his relief. They'd wanted to hire someone younger anyway, someone less intimidating to the male students. Packing took an hour. Everything she owned fit into 2 bags and a trunk. Mrs. Chen fussed over her at breakfast. "You sure about this, honey? Going all that way to marry a stranger seems awful risky." "Riskier than staying?" The older woman's face softened. "Fair point." On her last day in Cedar Falls, Evelyn walked past the schoolhouse one final time. Through the windows, she could see her replacement, a pretty girl of 19, blonde and soft-spoken, exactly what they wanted. Good for her. Maybe she'd fit where Evelyn never could. The train station was nearly empty. No one came to see her off. Why would they? She'd never quite belonged here anyway. Evelyn boarded the westbound train with her 2 bags, her teaching certificate folded in her pocket, and absolutely no illusions about what she was doing. She was trading herself for security, honest transaction, honestly made. If that made her a coward or a whore or whatever the gossips would call her once she was gone, so be it. At least she'd finally stopped pretending love was something she could earn by being smaller. The journey west was exactly as miserable as advertised. 3 days of rattling rails, hard seats, and cramped quarters with strangers who either ignored her or stared too long. Evelyn kept to herself, reading the same book over and over without absorbing a word. The landscape changed outside her window, flatlands giving way to hills, hills rising into mountains, civilization thinning until there was nothing but wild country and sky that went on forever. At Billings, she changed trains. The second leg was worse. Smaller car, rougher track, passengers who looked like they'd sooner rob you than talk to you. A man across the aisle tried conversation. "Traveling alone, miss?" "Yes." "Dangerous for a woman." "Less dangerous than staying put." He didn't speak to her again. Silver Creek Station wasn't really a station, just a platform, a water tower, and a single building that might have been a ticket office once but now looked abandoned. Evelyn stepped off the train with her bags, into wind that cut like knives and air that tasted like snow, even though it was barely October. The platform was empty except for one man. She knew it was him immediately. Cole Maddox stood like he owned the ground beneath his boots and the sky above them. Tall. Taller than her, which was rare. Broad-shouldered in a way that spoke of physical labor, not just genetics. Dark hair, darker eyes, expression that gave away absolutely nothing. He didn't smile, didn't move to help with her bags, just watched her approach with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating livestock. Evelyn stopped 3 feet away and met his gaze without flinching. "Mr. Maddox." "Miss Hart." His voice was exactly what she'd expected, low, controlled, empty of warmth. "You look like your description." "So do you." Something almost like amusement flickered across his face, gone so fast she might have imagined it. "Wagons this way." He turned and walked toward a heavy ranch wagon, without waiting to see if she'd follow. After a moment, Evelyn picked up her bags and did. The wagon was built for function, not comfort. Cole loaded her trunk with efficient movements, then stood by the driver's seat waiting. She climbed up herself. He didn't offer help, and she didn't expect it. They rode in silence for the first mile. The landscape around Silver Creek was brutal and beautiful. Endless rolling plains broken by distant mountains, grass the color of old gold, sky so huge it made her feel like an insect. No houses, no people, just land and wind and the creak of wagon wheels. Finally, Cole spoke. "You understand what this is." Not a question. Evelyn kept her eyes on the horizon. "A transaction." "Exactly." He didn't look at her. "I need an heir. You need security. That's the arrangement. Nothing more." "I read your advertisement, Mr. Maddox. I'm not confused about the terms." "Good." He paused. "I investigated you thoroughly. 5 broken engagements, reputation for being difficult. Too smart, too independent, too honest. Men found you problematic." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I'm aware. I'm not like those men." Now he did look at her, and his eyes were chips of ice. "I don't care if you're difficult. I don't care if you have opinions. I don't care if you're smarter than me. What I care about is whether you can fulfill our agreement without creating emotional complications. I can. Can you? He studied her like she was a puzzle. Because in my experience, women say they want clarity and structure, but what they really want is to be convinced they're special, to be courted, to be loved. The word loved came out like an obscenity. Evelyn turned to face him fully. Mr. Maddox, I've spent the last decade learning exactly how not special I am. 5 different men have explained in careful detail why I'm unsuitable for marriage. I'm too tall, too educated, too opinionated, too honest, too independent, too unfeminine. I don't need you to convince me I'm special. I just need you to honor our contract. Something shifted in his expression, calculation recalibrating. You really mean that? Every word. Good. He turned back to the road. Then we'll get along fine. They rode in silence for another mile before Evelyn spoke again. May I ask a question? You can ask. I may not answer. Why this arrangement? You're clearly successful. You could find a wife the traditional way. Cole's hands tightened on the reins. When he spoke, his voice was carefully empty. I was married before, traditional way. Love, romance, all of it. She left. I'm sorry. Don't be. The words were sharp. She taught me a valuable lesson. Love is a liability. Romance is a risk. Feelings change, but contracts are enforceable. This time, I'm doing it right. Evelyn absorbed that. So you want a wife who won't love you? I want a partner who won't leave me. He glanced at her. Can you be that? Could she? Evelyn thought about Cedar Falls, about teaching certificates and broken engagements, about being wrong by virtue of being herself. Yes, she said, I can be that. Then we have a deal. Silver Creek Ranch appeared on the horizon an hour later, a sprawling complex of buildings set against the mountains like a fortress. Main house, barns, bunkhouse, corrals. Bigger than Evelyn had imagined. More isolated. This would be her home now. Her prison or her sanctuary, depending on how well she could hold to the terms. Cole pulled the wagon up to the main house and finally helped her down. Not out of courtesy, but simple efficiency. I'll show you the house. Your room. Then we'll discuss the contract. My room? She'd assumed separate quarters until we finalized terms. He was already walking toward the house. I'm not a barbarian, Miss Hart. We'll conduct this properly. The house was impressive, solid construction, well-maintained, furnished with care if not warmth. Cole showed her through quickly, naming rooms without emotion. Parlor, kitchen, study, upstairs, 3 bedrooms. He opened the door to one. Yours, for now. It was larger than her entire room in Cedar Falls. Bed, wardrobe, desk, window overlooking the mountains. Simple, but comfortable. Thank you. He nodded once. Dinner's at 6. We'll discuss terms then. Dress however you're comfortable. I don't care about appearances. He left her alone. Evelyn stood in the center of her new room and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. What had she done? Dinner was exactly as awkward as expected. Cole's housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Granger, served roast beef and potatoes with the silent efficiency of someone who'd seen everything and judged most of it wanting. Evelyn sat across from Cole at a table built for 12, feeling like a specimen under examination. He ate methodically, without pleasure or conversation. Finally, he set down his fork. The contract. Yes. He pulled papers from his jacket. I had my lawyer draw this up based on your letter. Read it carefully. Ask questions. I want you to understand exactly what you're agreeing to. Evelyn took the contract and began reading. It was thorough. Brutally so. Terms of arrangement between Cole Maddox and Evelyn Hart. Purpose. Production of legitimate heirs to inherit Silver Creek Ranch and associated properties. Duration. Permanent marriage contract, legally binding. Obligations of Miss Hart. Cohabitation at Silver Creek Ranch. Submission to medical examination to confirm fertility. Bearing of minimum one she child, preferably male. Management of household operations. Discretion regarding personal arrangements. No romantic expectations or demands for affection. No interference with ranch business operations. Provisions for Miss Hart. Legal marriage with full property rights under Montana territory law. Private bedroom and personal space. A monthly allowance for personal expenses. Full medical care during pregnancy and childbirth. Education funds for any children produced. Inheritance rights standard to territorial law. In event of divorce initiated by Mr. Maddox, lump sum settlement of $5,000 and return transportation. Conditions for termination. Failure to produce heir within 3 years. Arrangement dissolved, settlement paid. Adultery by either party. Immediate termination, no settlement. Violation of discretion clause, immediate termination, no settlement. Death of either party, standard inheritance law applies. Evelyn read it twice, then a third time. You've thought of everything. I try to. Cole watched her face. Questions? Several. She set down the papers. First, you say preferably male for the child. What if we only have daughters? Then we keep trying until we have a son, or we accept that one of our daughters will inherit. I'd prefer a male heir for simplicity, but I'm not medieval about it. Second question, submission to medical examination. What exactly does that entail? Dr. Morrison in town will confirm you're healthy and capable of bearing children. Nothing invasive unless you consent. And if I'm not capable, not. Then we dissolve this arrangement with full settlement. I'm not trying to trap you, Miss Hart. I'm trying to be clear. Evelyn nodded slowly. Third question, no romantic expectations or demands for affection. Does that mean we'll maintain separate bedrooms permanently? Cole's expression didn't change. Until you conceive, we'll share a bed when necessary for that purpose. After, separate quarters unless otherwise agreed. I have no interest in extended intimacy. The words should have stung. Somehow, they didn't. There was relief in his honesty. Fourth question. Evelyn met his eyes. Why did you choose me? Out of all the women who must have responded to that advertisement, why me? For the first time, Cole almost smiled. You were the only one who didn't lie. The others wrote about being agreeable, docile, eager to please. You wrote about being difficult, educated, and unwanted. You told me exactly who you are instead of who you thought I wanted. And that's what you want? Someone difficult? I want someone honest. He leaned forward slightly. I want someone who won't pretend this is something it's not, who won't resent me for not loving her because she doesn't love me either. Can you be that person, Evelyn? The use of her first name sent something strange through her chest. Not attraction, she barely knew him, but recognition, maybe, of someone else who'd been broken by different rules. Yes, she said quietly, I can be that person. Then sign. He pushed the contract across the table, offered her a pen. Evelyn stared at the papers. This was it. The moment where she traded away every girlhood dream she'd ever had about love and romance and being chosen for something other than her utility. But those dreams had died around rejection number 3 anyway. This was just making it official. She signed her name in firm, clear strokes. Cole signed below her, then called for Mrs. Granger to witness. The housekeeper did so without comment, though her expression suggested she had plenty of opinions she was keeping to herself. There. Cole took the contract, folded it carefully. We're agreed. I'll file this with the county tomorrow to make it legal. When's the wedding? This weekend. Simple ceremony, minimum witnesses, unless you want something more elaborate. Evelyn almost laughed. No, simple is fine. Good. He stood. I have work to do. Mrs. Granger will show you the rest of the house tomorrow. Explain your responsibilities. For tonight, settle in, rest, adjust. He walked to the door, then paused. Evelyn? She looked up. I know this isn't what women dream about, but I'll honor my word. You'll be provided for, protected, and treated fairly. That's more than most marriages offer. Before she could respond, he was gone. Evelyn sat alone at the too large table, contract signed, future decided, and tried to figure out if she felt relieved or terrified. Maybe both. Maybe that was the same thing anyway. Well, the wedding was exactly as promised, simple to the point of stark. Saturday afternoon, in the parlor of Silver Creek Ranch, Judge Morrison presiding, Mrs. Granger and the ranch foreman as witnesses. Evelyn wore her best dress, gray wool, practical, nothing special. Cole wore the same clothes he'd worn every day that week. The ceremony took 7 minutes. Do you, Cole Maddox, take this woman? I do. Do you, Evelyn Hart, take this man? I do. By the power vested in me by Montana Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. No kiss. Cole nodded once, shook the judge's hand, paid him, and that was that. Mrs. Granger served cake she'd baked without being asked. The foreman made awkward congratulations and left as soon as politely possible. By sunset, Evelyn was legally Mrs. Cole Maddox, and nothing felt different at all. Cole worked until late that night, as he had every night that week. Evelyn sat in her room, still, and tried to process what she'd done. She'd married a stranger for security. She'd signed away her body for the promise of a child and a home. She'd chosen survival over every soft, foolish thing she'd once believed about love. And somehow, she didn't regret it. When Cole finally knocked on her door near midnight, she knew what it meant. Come in. He entered, still fully dressed, expression unreadable. We should discuss expectations. For tonight. Evelyn stood to face him. I understand what's required. Do you? He studied her. This doesn't have to happen yet. We can wait until... Why wait? She kept her voice steady. We both know why we're here. Delaying doesn't change the terms. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. You're very practical. So are you. True. He stepped closer, and for the first time, Evelyn saw past his control to something underneath. Not warmth exactly, but not complete coldness either. I won't hurt you. I know. And if you want to stop, I won't. She met his gaze directly. I agreed to this, Cole. I don't make promises I can't keep. The use of his first name seemed to unlock something. He reached for her, and Evelyn didn't flinch. What happened next was neither romantic nor cruel. Just two people fulfilling the terms of a contract with as much dignity as the situation allowed. When it was over, Cole didn't linger, didn't pretend it was something it wasn't. Good night, Evelyn. Good night. He left. She lay alone in her bed, staring at the ceiling, and tried to figure out how she felt. Not violated. He'd been careful, controlled, as promised. Not loved, of course not. But not quite empty either. Just changed, bound, committed to a path she couldn't reverse. Evelyn closed her eyes and let sleep take her, because tomorrow she'd wake up as someone's wife, in a house that was somehow hers, with responsibilities she'd chosen and a future she'd built out of rejection and necessity. It wasn't love, but maybe it was enough. The first month of marriage taught Evelyn that loneliness had different flavors depending on whether you were alone or simply unseen. She woke before dawn most mornings to find Cole already gone, out to the barns, the pastures, wherever ranch work demanded his presence. He returned for meals with the regularity of a clock, ate without conversation, and disappeared again until darkness forced him inside. They shared a bed 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Cole approached these encounters with the same efficiency he brought to everything else. No preamble, no pretense, just the mechanical fulfillment of contractual obligation. Afterward, he always left. Evelyn told herself this was exactly what she'd signed up for. No romance, no expectations, just terms, cleanly executed. So why did the silence feel like it was eating her alive? Mrs. Granger ran the household with iron precision, making it clear through pointed sighs and minimal instruction that Evelyn's presence was tolerated but unnecessary. The housekeeper had managed Silver Creek for 15 years. She didn't need some contractual wife disrupting her systems. I could help with the cooking, Evelyn offered one morning, watching Mrs. Granger knead bread with violent efficiency. I've got it handled. Or the cleaning. I'm not afraid of work. Never said you were. Mrs. Granger didn't look up. But this kitchen's been mine since before you were born, and I don't need another set of hands making a mess of my organization. Evelyn retreated to the parlor, then to her room, then to wandering the property like a ghost haunting her own life. The ranch stretched for thousands of acres, more land than she could comprehend, dotted with cattle that looked like moving specks from the house. She'd watched the ranch hands work from a distance, their shouts and laughter carrying on the wind, belonging to a world she wasn't part of. She tried reading, got through half her small library in 2 weeks and started over because there was nothing else to do. She tried writing letters, but to whom? She had no one back in Cedar Falls who'd care to hear from her. 3 weeks into the marriage, Evelyn stood at the kitchen window watching Cole work a horse in the corral and finally admitted the truth to herself. She was dying of boredom and uselessness in equal measure. That evening at dinner, she broke the silence. "I need something to do." Cole looked up from his plate, fork suspended. "You're managing the household." "Mrs. Granger manages the household. I'm just here." "You're adjusting. That takes time." "I've adjusted." Evelyn set down her own fork with more force than necessary. "I understand the routine. I know where things are. I'm not confused or overwhelmed. I'm bored." He studied her with that analytical gaze she was learning to recognize. "What do you want? Work? Responsibility? Something that matters." She leaned forward. "You said in your advertisement you wanted someone to manage household operations. Let me actually do that. Or if Mrs. Granger won't tolerate my interference, and she won't, give me something else. The books, inventory, supply ordering, anything." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "You can read financial records?" "I kept the books for the school in Cedar Falls, basic accounting, supply management, budget reconciliation. I'm not an expert, but I'm competent." "The ranch accounts are complicated." "Then they'll take longer to learn." She held his gaze. "I'm not asking for charity, Cole. I'm asking to be useful. That's what you hired me for, isn't it? To be capable?" Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but recognition. "Tuesday. Come to my office after breakfast. I'll show you the ledgers." It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, for the first time since the wedding, Evelyn fell asleep feeling like she'd won a small battle. The office was Cole's domain, neat to the point of severity. Every paper filed, every surface clear except for the work immediately at hand. He gestured to a chair across from his desk without ceremony. "These are the operating accounts." He pulled out 3 massive ledgers. Income from cattle sales, expenses for feed, equipment, wages. This one tracks breeding records. This one's property maintenance. Evelyn opened the first ledger and immediately saw problems. The handwriting was barely legible. Entries were made sporadically, sometimes weeks apart. Numbers didn't always add up cleanly. It wasn't incompetent exactly, just neglected. "Who's been keeping these?" "Me. When I have time." Cole's jaw tightened. "Which isn't often enough." "I can see that." She traced a column of figures that definitely didn't balance. "This entry from March, you've got the same expense listed twice." He leaned over to look, close enough that she could smell leather, and something else, something distinctly him. "Hell, that's a $300 error. And here," she flipped pages. "You sold cattle in April, but there's no record of the buyer or the head count. Just a lump sum." Cole's expression darkened. "That was the Morrison deal, I remember it. But if someone questioned it a year from now, auditor, lawyer, business dispute, you'd have no documentation." He stared at the ledger like it had personally betrayed him. "I hate this part. The paperwork. The tracking. I can run cattle, manage land, handle men. But this," he gestured sharply at the books. "This makes me want to burn the whole system down." Evelyn felt something dangerous flutter in her chest. Not attraction, she wasn't foolish enough for that. But connection, maybe. Recognition of shared competence in different areas. "Let me fix it," she said quietly. "Let me reorganize the system, reconcile the accounts, set up proper tracking. I'm good at this, Cole. Let me be good at something here." He looked at her for a long moment, and she watched him calculate, weighing risk against benefit, pride against practicality. "All right," he said finally. "The books are yours. But I need weekly reports. I need to know where every dollar goes." "You'll have them. And if you find problems, theft, errors, anything questionable, you tell me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself." "Agreed." He nodded once. "Then get to work." Evelyn dove into the ledgers like a woman starving, because that's exactly what she was. Starving for purpose, for competence, for proof that she was something other than a womb with a contract attached. The accounts were a disaster. 3 months of reconciliation revealed systematic disorganization. Duplicate entries, missing receipts, vague categorizations that made tracking impossible. But beneath the chaos, she found the bones of a well-run operation. Cole knew his business. He just couldn't stand the administrative burden of proving it on paper. She created new systems, color-coded entries, cross-referenced inventories, monthly summaries that showed trends at a glance. The work consumed her days in the best possible way. Mrs. Granger noticed the change. "You've been busy." Finally, Evelyn looked up from a ledger covered in her neat handwriting. "It's nice to be useful." "Useful?" The housekeeper's mouth twitched. "That what you call it?" "What would you call it?" "Necessary." Mrs. Granger set down a cup of coffee Evelyn hadn't asked for. "Mr. Maddox has been trying to manage those books for years. Drives him half crazy every time he looks at them. Maybe you're not just useful, girl. Maybe you're necessary." It was the closest thing to approval Evelyn had received since arriving. She took it and held it carefully, like something fragile. The weekly reports became Tuesday evening rituals. Evelyn would prepare a summary of the week's financial activity. Cole would review it with fierce attention to detail, and they'd discuss problems or questions that arose. It was the most conversation they'd had since the wedding. The feed supplier raised prices again, Evelyn noted during the third week's report. 15% since January. Cole's jaw tightened. Thompson's getting bold. "Do we have alternatives?" "Two others, both farther away, which means higher transport costs." He scanned her figures. "You've calculated the break-even point?" "Thompson stays cheaper until distance exceeds 40 miles. After that, we're better off going to Miller's operation in Whitehall." He looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You did the math on transport costs?" "Basic logistics. I used to organize supply chains for the school district." Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. "Turns out cattle feed and textbooks follow the same economic principles." "Smart." The word came out almost grudging, like he hadn't meant to say it aloud. "That's what got me rejected 5 times, remember? Too smart for my own good." Cole's expression hardened. "Those men were idiots." "Maybe, but they were honest idiots. They knew what they wanted, and it wasn't me. Their loss." He turned back to the report, but something had shifted. "You're good at this, Evelyn. Better than I expected." It shouldn't have mattered. It was just a statement of fact about her competence with numbers. But it settled into her chest like warmth, and she carried it with her the rest of the evening. 2 months into the marriage, Dr. Morrison made a house call to confirm what Evelyn already suspected. She wasn't pregnant yet. "Not unusual," the doctor said, snapping his bag shut. "These things take time. You're healthy, Mrs. Maddox. Just keep doing what you're doing." He left quickly, uncomfortable with the clinical nature of the visit. Cole was waiting in the hallway when she emerged. "Well?" "Not yet." Something crossed his face too quick to read. Disappointment? Relief? Morrison said that's normal. "It is." They stood in awkward silence, both acutely aware that the contract specified 3 years to produce an heir. 2 months down, 34 to go. "We'll continue as scheduled," Cole said finally. "Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday." "Of course." He walked away, and Evelyn returned to the office where the ledgers waited with their clear problems and clearer solutions. At least numbers made sense. The first real crack in their arrangement came in early November, when the early snow hit. Evelyn woke to white silence and windows frosted with ice. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find the house in organized chaos. Mrs. Granger directing the ranch hands to secure shutters, Cole shouting orders about moving cattle to sheltered pastures, everyone moving with the urgency of people who knew Montana weather could kill. "Stay inside," Cole told her, already dressed for brutal weather. "This is going to be bad." "What can I do?" "Stay inside," he repeated, and was gone. Evelyn watched from the window as the men worked through the blizzard. Hours passed. The storm worsened. By afternoon, visibility was maybe 10 feet. Mrs. Granger made coffee and soup in grim silence. "How long will they be out there?" Evelyn asked. "Long as it takes." The housekeeper checked the window. "Cattle can't survive exposed in this. They'll work till every head's accounted for, or till the cold takes them. That's the job." Evelyn thought about Cole out in that frozen hell, thought about the contract that made her his wife but gave her no right to worry, and paced the parlor like a caged animal. They came back near midnight, half frozen, exhausted, covered in snow and ice. 3 ranch hands and Cole, moving like old men despite their relative youth. Mrs. Granger had hot water ready, blankets, food. Evelyn stood uselessly in the doorway, watching Cole strip off his frozen coat with hands that shook from cold. "All accounted for?" Mrs. Granger asked. "Lost 2 calves. The rest are secure." Cole's lips were nearly blue. "Jackson's got frostbite. Sent him to the bunkhouse with orders to soak his hands. You need to warm up too." "I'm fine." "You're half frozen," Evelyn said before she could stop herself, "and you're dripping ice water all over the floor. Go change before you catch pneumonia." Cole looked at her with surprise, like he'd forgotten she existed. "I said I'm fine. And I say you're a stubborn fool who's going to get sick if you don't get out of those wet clothes." She crossed her arms. "Which would be inconvenient for both of us, since our contract requires you to be alive and functional." Mrs. Granger made a noise that might have been a laugh. Cole's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something almost like amusement. "Worried about me, Mrs. Maddox?" "Worried about my investment," Evelyn shot back. "You die of pneumonia, I lose my security. Purely practical concern." "Right, practical." But he went upstairs to change, and when he came back down in dry clothes, he looked at her differently, like maybe he'd seen something he hadn't noticed before. They ate soup in the kitchen, all of them, ranch hands included, because the cold had stripped away normal hierarchy. The men talked about the storm, the close calls, the 2 calves they'd lost despite everything. Evelyn listened and said nothing, but she watched Cole thaw by the fire, watched the color come back to his face, watched him relax for the first time since she'd met him. When the hands finally left for the bunkhouse, it was nearly 2 in the morning. Cole stood by the fire, still warming himself, and Evelyn found herself standing next to him without quite knowing how she got there. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For noticing I was frozen. Mrs. Granger would have fussed, but she fusses about everything. You don't. So when you said something, I listened." Evelyn looked at him, really looked, saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, saw the weight of responsibility he carried, saw a man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone pass them. "You take care of a lot of people," she said. "Someone should take care of you too. Even if it's just practical concern." Something passed between them. Not romance. Nothing that soft. But recognition, maybe. Partnership beginning to feel like possibility. "It's not Tuesday," Cole said, and it took her a moment to understand what he meant. "No, it's Wednesday." "So we're off schedule?" "We are." He turned to face her fully. "I don't want to go to my room alone tonight. Not because of the contract, just because I don't want to be alone. Is that... Would you?" He couldn't finish the question, and Evelyn realized with shock that he was nervous. Cole Maddox, who controlled everything, was actually nervous about asking his own wife to keep him company. "Yes," she said simply. They went upstairs together. What happened was different from the scheduled encounters, slower, less mechanical, almost careful, like 2 people learning each other instead of just fulfilling terms. Afterward, Cole didn't leave. He fell asleep beside her, one arm thrown across her waist, his breathing deep and even. Evelyn lay awake in the dark, feeling the weight of him, the warmth, the strange intimacy of simply being next to another human being without purpose or contract between them. This was dangerous. This was exactly what she'd promised wouldn't happen. But she didn't move away, and when she finally slept, it was the best rest she'd had since arriving at Silver Creek Ranch. Morning came too soon. Evelyn woke to find Cole already up, dressed, standing by the window looking out at snow-covered land. "I should go," he said without turning around. "Check on the cattle. Make sure yesterday's work held through the night." "Of course." He started toward the door, then stopped, turned back. "Last night, that wasn't... We're not... I know what we are, Cole. I know what we're not." Evelyn kept her voice steady. "Last night doesn't change our agreement." Relief and something else crossed his face. "Good. That's good." He left. Evelyn dressed slowly, reminding herself of every lesson she'd learned in 32 years of being unwanted. Don't make more of things than they are. Don't mistake temporary warmth for permanent change. Don't be foolish enough to call it love just because he stayed the night. She went down to breakfast and threw herself into the ledgers with renewed focus. Numbers didn't lie. Numbers didn't create false hope. Numbers were safe. But 3 days later, when it was actually Tuesday and Cole came to her room as scheduled, something had shifted. He was gentler. She was more present. The mechanical quality that had defined their encounters before was gone, replaced by something harder to name. After, he hesitated before getting up to leave. "I could stay," he said carefully, "if you wanted." Evelyn's heart did something complicated and painful. "The contract doesn't require it." "I'm not talking about the contract." "Then what are you talking about?" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw past all his walls to something vulnerable underneath. "I don't know. That's the problem." "Cole." She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "We agreed. No romance? No emotional complications. You said yourself that love is a liability." "I did say that." "So what's changed?" "Nothing. Everything." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I don't know how to do this, Evelyn. I don't know how to be married to someone competent and interesting and—" He stopped abruptly. "And what?" "And not keep you at a distance." The admission seemed to cost him. "I built that contract to protect myself, to keep everything clear and transactional, but you're not what I expected." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What did you expect? Someone who'd follow the rules and not make me question them. Someone who'd stay in the space I defined and not push for more." His laugh was bitter. "Instead, I got you. Too smart for your own good, remember? Too honest. Too much," she finished. "That's what they all said. Too much of everything women aren't supposed to be." "No." Cole's voice was fierce. "Not too much, just more than I knew how to handle." They stared at each other across the bed that had become complicated territory. "What do you want?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Really want, not just what the contract says." Cole was silent for a long time. "I want to not be afraid of this. Of you. Of whatever this is becoming." "And are you? Afraid?" "Terrified." He said it like a confession. "Because the last time I let someone past my walls, she walked out and took half my soul with her. I swore I'd never risk that again. So you built a contract instead." "Yes." "And now the contract isn't enough." "No." He looked at her helplessly. "It's not." Evelyn's heart was pounding. This was the moment where everything could break or transform, where she could hold to the safety of their arrangement or risk stepping into something undefined and dangerous. "I can't love you," she said, and watched him flinch. "Not because you're not worth loving, but because I spent too many years learning that love is something I'm not equipped for. I'm too difficult, too independent, too honest. I know who I am, Cole. I know my limitations." "Evelyn," "But," she continued, "I could be your partner. Really your partner, not just legally. I could be someone you trust, someone you talk to, someone who sees you and doesn't run. If that's enough. If that's something you could want." Cole looked at her like she'd offered him something precious and terrifying in equal measure. "It's more than I thought I'd ever have," he said finally. "More than the contract promised. Then stay tonight. Not because it's Tuesday, not because we're following the schedule. Stay because you want to." He did. And when Evelyn woke in the morning with his arm still around her, she told herself this wasn't love, because love had never worked for people like them. This was something else. Something they were building together out of honesty and mutual damage and careful trust. Maybe it was better than love. Maybe it was the only thing that could actually last. The shift between them was subtle enough that Mrs. Granger pretended not to notice, which meant she noticed everything. Cole started taking breakfast in the main house instead of grabbing coffee on his way to the barns. Evelyn found herself cooking alongside the housekeeper, not because Mrs. Granger needed help, but because the kitchen had become a place where the three of them existed in something like companionship. "You're making the eggs wrong," Mrs. Granger said one morning, not unkindly. "I'm making them the way I've always made them." "Which is wrong." The older woman nudged Evelyn aside with her hip and took over the pan. "Lower heat, more butter, patience. That's the secret to everything worth doing." Cole walked in mid-lecture, hair still damp from washing, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "She giving you cooking lessons?" "Against my will, yes." "Good. Her scrambled eggs are better than anything you'll get in town." He poured coffee, then did something that would have seemed impossible 6 weeks ago. He poured a second cup and handed it to Evelyn without being asked. She took it, their fingers brushing, and something warm settled in her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. Mrs. Granger saw the exchange and turned back to the eggs, with a knowing expression she had the grace not to voice. These small domesticities became routine. Cole asking about the ledgers over dinner, Evelyn offering opinions on ranch operations that he actually considered. Conversations that stretched past necessity into something dangerously close to enjoyment. But the contract still hung between them like a ghost at the table. 3 months into the marriage, Dr. Morrison returned for another examination. "Still nothing?" Cole asked when the doctor emerged from Evelyn's room. "These things take time, Mr. Maddox. Mrs. Maddox is perfectly healthy. There's no medical concern. But 3 months is not unusual." Morrison's tone was firm. "Some couples take a year or more. Stop worrying and let nature do its work." After the doctor left, Evelyn found Cole in his office, staring at the contract that lay on his desk like an accusation. 3 years, he said, without looking up. "That's what we agreed. 3 years to produce an heir, or the arrangement dissolves." "I remember the terms. Do you ever—" He stopped, started again. "Do you ever think about what happens if it doesn't work? If 3 years pass and there's no child?" Evelyn's stomach tightened. "The contract is clear. You pay the settlement, and I leave." "Right. The settlement." His jaw worked. $5,000 and a train ticket back to nowhere. "It's generous compensation for 3 years of work. Is that what this is to you?" Cole looked at her finally, something raw in his expression. "Work? What else would it be?" "I don't know. That's the problem." He stood abruptly, moved to the window. 6 months ago, I knew exactly what this was. A transaction. Clean, simple. Now I don't know what the hell we're doing. Evelyn wanted to go to him, wanted to say the things building in her chest that had no place in a contractual arrangement. Instead, she stayed where she was, safe behind her own walls. "We're doing what we agreed to do. Nothing's changed." "Everything's changed." His voice was rough. "You know it has." "Then what do you want, Cole? Really want?" He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "I want to burn that contract. I want to stop counting months and calculating timelines. I want—" He stopped himself, fists clenched. "It doesn't matter what I want. We made an agreement. Agreements can be modified. To what? What would we even modify it to?" His laugh was bitter. "I don't know how to be a real husband, Evelyn. I don't know how to do this without rules and structure. The contract is the only thing keeping me from what? From wanting things I swore I'd never want again." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Evelyn's throat was tight. "And if I told you I'm starting to want things too? Things that weren't in the agreement?" Cole crossed the room in 3 strides, stopped inches from her. Close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between what he'd promised himself and what he was beginning to feel. "Don't," he said roughly. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them." "I mean them." "You can't. You said yourself you can't love." "I said I can't love the way those other men wanted me to love. Soft and sweet and diminished." She held his gaze. "But this? Whatever this is between us, I could do this. I could want this. If you'd let me." Cole's hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. "I don't know how to let someone in without a contract telling me exactly what they're allowed to take. Then we write a new contract, new terms, whatever you need to feel safe. I don't want another contract." His forehead touched hers, voice dropping to barely a whisper. "I want to trust you without paperwork forcing you to stay." "You can." "Can I? Or will you leave the minute things get hard? The minute you realize I'm not—" He stopped, pulled back. "My first wife left because I wasn't enough. Not romantic enough. Not emotionally available enough. Not whatever the hell she needed that I couldn't give. What makes you different?" Evelyn understood then. Not just the walls, but what they were protecting. Not control. Fear. Fear that he'd been abandoned once for being exactly who he was, and it would happen again. "I'm different because I know what it's like to be not enough," she said quietly. "I've been rejected for being too much and not enough so many times I stopped counting. So I'm not looking for you to be different than you are, Cole. I'm just looking for you to be honest about who you are and let me decide if that's enough for me. And is it enough? She thought about the man who'd advertised for a wife like she was livestock, who'd investigated her failures and called them favorable, who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten how to live without them. Thought about how he was learning to stay through the night, to ask instead of demand, to want things he'd sworn off wanting. Yes, she said, you're enough. Something broke in his expression. He kissed her then, and it wasn't careful or contractual. It was desperate and honest and terrifying in its intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers again. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to be married for real instead of on paper. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. What if we can't? Then at least we'll fail honestly instead of succeeding at something neither of us actually wanted. He laughed, surprising them both. You're strange, you know that? I've been told, usually right before being rejected. I'm not rejecting you. Good, because I'm not leaving. They stood there in his office, holding each other like people who'd finally admitted they were drowning and needed someone else to help keep their heads above water. It wasn't love, not the way poems described it, but it was real, and it was theirs. And maybe that was better anyway. The next morning, Cole did something unprecedented. He asked Evelyn to ride out with him to check the northern pastures. I can manage the books from here, she said, surprised. I know. I want you to see the land, understand what you're keeping the books for. So she borrowed pants from Mrs. Granger's nephew, scandalous but practical, and learned to sit a horse well enough not to fall off immediately. Cole was patient in a way she hadn't expected, adjusting her stirrups, showing her how to hold the reins, not laughing when she gripped the saddle horn like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Relax, he said, riding alongside her. The horse can feel your tension. The horse can feel free to be less tall and fast. We're barely moving. That's your perspective from up there on your horse that isn't trying to kill you. Cole's laugh was genuine, and the sound of it did something dangerous to Evelyn's carefully maintained emotional distance. The northern pastures stretched endlessly under big sky, cattle dotting the landscape like slow-moving clouds. Cole pointed out landmarks, explained grazing rotations, talked about the land with a passion she'd never heard from him before. This section here, see how the grass is different, richer? He gestured toward a valley. That's prime grazing. We're 3 times the rockier ground to the east. So why not use it year-round? Because you'd destroy it. Land needs rest, same as people. Overgraze, and you'll turn it into dead dirt. He looked at her. Everything worth keeping needs space to recover. Evelyn wondered if they were still talking about grass. They stopped for lunch by a creek that cut through the property, cold and clear and alive with the sound of water over stone. Cole unpacked bread and cheese from his saddlebag with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times alone. You come out here a lot? Evelyn asked, watching him. Every week. Sometimes more. He handed her food. It's quiet. No demands. No expectations. Just land and work. Sounds lonely. It was. He met her eyes. Past tense. They ate in comfortable silence, and Evelyn felt something shift in her understanding of him. This wasn't a man who didn't feel, this was a man who felt too much, and had learned to bury it under control and isolation. Tell me about her, she said quietly. Your first wife. Cole's jaw tightened. Why? Because she's part of why you built that contract, part of why you're afraid. And if we're doing this, really doing this, I should understand. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Catherine. Her name was Catherine. He stared at the creek like it held answers. Met her in town, at a dance. She was beautiful, charming, everything a man was supposed to want. I courted her properly, did everything right. Married her thinking I'd finally done something that would make my father proud. What happened? I happened. His voice was flat. Turns out being a rancher's wife wasn't as romantic as she'd imagined. The isolation got to her. The work. The fact that I was more comfortable with cattle than conversation. She wanted someone who'd write her poetry and take her dancing and make her feel special every damn day. I wanted someone who'd understand that the ranch came first because it had to. So she left. Cole picked up a stone, threw it into the creek with controlled violence. Told me I had a business where my heart should be. Said she'd rather live poor with someone who actually loved her than rich with a man who treated her like another asset to manage. That must have hurt. It did. Then it made me angry. Then it made me smart. He looked at Evelyn. I realized she was right. I couldn't give her what she needed, so I decided to find someone who needed what I could actually give. Security, stability, honesty instead of romance. That's where the contract came from. Never again would someone expect me to be something I wasn't. Evelyn absorbed this. And then you got me. Then I got you. Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. Woman who'd been rejected so many times she stopped expecting anything soft. Figured we'd be perfect. Two people who didn't want love making a practical arrangement. But you're not who I thought you'd be. You're difficult, yes. Independent, stubborn, too smart for your own good. All of that. But you're also... He struggled for words. You see me? Not what you want me to be, just what I am. And instead of leaving, you stay, even when I don't make it easy. You do the same for me. Do I? Yes. Evelyn's voice was firm. You don't try to make me smaller. You don't punish me for being competent. You gave me work that matters and trusted me to do it well. Do you know how rare that is? How many men would rather have an incompetent wife who makes them feel superior than a capable partner who challenges them? Their loss. That's what you said before, but you meant it. You actually value the things about me that other men hated. She looked at him directly. That's not nothing, Cole. That's not just a contract. He reached across the space between them, took her hand. No, it's not. They sat there by the creek, hands linked, and Evelyn felt the ground shift beneath everything she'd believed about herself and what she deserved. The ride back was quieter but easier. Evelyn more confident in the saddle, Cole more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. As they approached the ranch buildings, he said, I want you to come out with me more often. Learn the land, meet the hands properly, understand how everything works. Why? Because this is yours too now. Or it could be if you want it. The contract says, forget the contract. Cole reined his horse to a stop, waited for her to do the same. I'm talking about what I want, not what some lawyer wrote down. I want you to be part of this, Evelyn, really part of it. Not just managing books, but knowing the operation, having opinions about how we run things, being my partner in all of it. That's a lot of trust to put in someone you've known 4 months. I know. He held her gaze. I'm choosing to trust you anyway. It was the closest thing to a declaration of feeling he'd ever made, and they both knew it. Okay, Evelyn said quietly. Teach me. So he did. Over the next weeks, Evelyn learned the rhythm of ranch life from the inside. She met the hands properly, rough men who respected competence and didn't much care that she wore pants and asked questions. She learned to recognize individual cattle by their markings, to spot signs of illness or injury, to understand the endless cycle of breeding and birth and sale that kept the operation running. She also learned that Cole Maddox was respected, bordering on revered by the men who worked for him. Tough but fair, demanding but honest, the kind of boss who'd work alongside you in a storm rather than watch from shelter. He's a good man, the foreman told her one afternoon while they repaired fence. Hard but good. Been through some things that would have broken weaker men. His first wife? That's one thing. His father's another. The foreman spat tobacco juice. Old man Maddox was mean as a snake, ran this place like a prison camp. Cole grew up thinking that's what strength looked like. Control everything, trust nobody, never show weakness. Took him years to figure out his father was just cruel, not strong. Evelyn absorbed this, pieces of Cole clicking into place. Is that why he needs everything structured, controlled? Probably. Man builds walls to keep out what hurt him before. Problem is, walls keep out the good things too. That night, Evelyn found Cole in his office going through contracts for next season's cattle sales. She knocked even though the door was open. Am I interrupting? He looked up and something softened in his expression. Never. She came in, closed the door behind her. I talked to Henderson today. About your father. Cole's face shuddered. Henderson talks too much. He cares about you. They all do. Evelyn sat across from him. You don't have to be like him, you know. Your father. I know that. Do you? Because sometimes I think you're so afraid of being cruel that you've decided being distant is safer. Like if you never let yourself care too much, you can't hurt anyone the way he hurt you. Cole's hands stilled on the papers. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I've spent 4 months watching you, Cole. Watching you be kind in ways you don't even recognize as kindness, because they don't fit some romantic ideal. You take care of your men. You pay fair wages. You work beside them instead of above them. You gave me meaningful work instead of keeping me decorative and useless. That's not cruelty. That's not your father. My father never hit me, Cole said quietly. Never raised a hand, just made it clear every single day that nothing I did was good enough. Ranch wasn't profitable enough. I wasn't tough enough. Emotions were weakness, and weakness was unforgivable. By the time he died, I'd spent 20 years trying to prove I was strong enough to earn his respect. Did you? No. He died disappointed. Cole's smile was bitter. Turns out you can't please someone who's determined to be unpleasable. Evelyn understood then, the walls, the contract, the desperate need for clear terms and measurable outcomes. Cole had grown up in a world where love was conditional and constantly withheld, where nothing he did was ever quite enough. I'm not your father, she said quietly, and I'm not Catherine. I'm not going to leave because you're not romantic enough or because you prioritize work. I'm not going to withhold affection as punishment, and I'm not going to measure you against some impossible standard you can never meet. What are you going to do? I'm going to stay. I'm going to work beside you. I'm going to be honest when I'm frustrated and present when things are good, and loyal even when it's hard. Because that's what partnership is. Not romance, not perfect understanding, just two people choosing each other every day and doing the work. Cole stared at her like she'd said something in a language he was only beginning to understand. I don't deserve you, he said finally. Probably not. I don't deserve you either. We're both difficult people with too much baggage and not enough softness. But maybe that's exactly why this works. He stood, came around the desk, pulled her up into his arms. I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to be distant when I shouldn't be, controlling when you need space, cold when you need warmth. That's who I am. And I'm going to be stubborn and opinionated and too honest for comfort. I'm going to challenge you when you'd rather I just agree. I'm going to want more responsibility than you're comfortable giving. That's who I am. So we're both disasters. Perfectly matched disasters. He kissed her, and it felt different than before. Less desperate, more certain. Like they'd finally stopped fighting what this was becoming and decided to let it happen. When they broke apart, Cole kept his arms around her. The contract, he said. I want to change it. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Change it how? Take out the 3-year clause, the dissolution terms, the whole thing about heirs and arrangements. He looked at her seriously. I want a real marriage. Not because a piece of paper says so, but because we choose it. Both of us. Every day. And if I can't have children, if 3 years pass and there's still no heir, then we figure it out together. Maybe we adopt. Maybe we accept that the ranch goes to someone else eventually. I don't care, Evelyn. I just want to stop treating you like a business decision I might regret. Her throat was tight. What about love? You said it was a liability. I said that when I thought I could control this. When I thought I could keep you at a distance. His hand came up to cup her face. But you're already past every wall I built. So maybe love isn't the liability. Maybe trying to prevent it is. Cole Maddox, are you telling me you love me? He was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with words that didn't come easily. I'm telling you that when I wake up, the first thing I think about is whether you're still there. I'm telling you that your opinion matters more to me than any contract ever could. I'm telling you that the idea of you leaving, really leaving, scares me worse than anything my father ever did. He took a shaky breath. I don't know if that's love, but it's as close as I know how to get. Evelyn felt tears she hadn't expected burn behind her eyes. That's close enough, is it? Because I need you to be sure. I need to know you're not just staying because the contract says so or because you're too practical to walk away from security. I need... She kissed him quiet, poured everything she couldn't say into it, and when she pulled back, they were both breathing hard. I'm staying because I want to, she said fiercely. Because against all logic and self-preservation, I've gotten attached to a stubborn, emotionally constipated rancher who advertised for a wife like she was cattle. Because somehow, impossibly, you see me and don't flinch. That's why I'm staying. Cole's laugh was shaky with relief. Emotionally constipated? Would you prefer emotionally unavailable? I prefer you didn't psychoanalyze me at all. Too bad. That's part of the package deal. He pulled her close again, buried his face in her hair. I'm keeping you. Contract or no contract, you're mine and I'm not letting go. Possessive much? You have no idea. But she did. She could feel it in the way he held her, the way he'd slowly led her past every defense, the way he was choosing vulnerability even though it terrified him. They stood there in his office, holding each other, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest that she'd never felt before. Not love. Maybe not yet. But something like home. Like belonging. Like finally being enough exactly as she was. We should burn it, she said against his shirt. The contract. Burn it and start over. No. She pulled back, confused. No? Keep it. Cole's expression was serious. Not as rules. As a reminder of where we started, what we were willing to settle for before we knew better. Keep it so we never forget how bad it could have been if we'd actually stuck to those terms. Evelyn thought about that. About the cold transaction they'd almost had, the distance they'd almost maintained, the safety they'd almost chosen over risk. Okay, she said, we'll keep it. But we're writing something new too. New terms. Real ones. What kind of terms? Honesty. Partnership. Showing up even when it's hard. Being loyal even when we're furious with each other. Choosing this every day instead of just once. She looked at him. Think you can handle those terms? I can try. Good enough. That night they didn't go to their separate rooms. They went to his. Now theirs. And what happened wasn't about contracts or schedules or producing heirs. It was about two people who'd finally stopped hiding behind agreements and started building something real. After, lying in the dark with Cole's breathing deep and even beside her, Evelyn allowed herself to think the word she'd been avoiding. Love. Maybe this was what it looked like when two broken people built it from scratch, instead of waiting for it to strike like lightning. Messy and difficult and honest. Built on respect and partnership instead of romance and passion. Different than what she'd imagined as a girl. Better than what she'd settled for as a woman. And entirely, impossibly theirs. Winter came to Silver Creek Ranch with the kind of cold that made bones ache and breath freeze in the air. Evelyn woke one December morning to find frost patterns on the windows so intricate they looked like lace, and Cole already gone despite the hour being barely past dawn. She found him in the barn, shoulder deep in a difficult calving, his face tight with concentration and something close to worry. How long have you been out here? She asked, wrapping her coat tighter against the cold. Since 3. This one's breech. He didn't look up from his work, hands moving with careful precision inside the laboring cow. Going to lose them both if I can't turn the calf. Evelyn had seen enough ranch work by now to understand what that meant. Loss was part of the business, but it never got easier, especially not for a man who took every death as a personal failure. What can I do? Nothing. Go back inside where it's warm. Cole, I said go back. He stopped, looked at her properly. Sorry. That came out wrong. I just meant there's nothing to be done except wait and see if I can save them. She moved closer instead of leaving. Then I'll wait with you. For a moment she thought he'd argue, but instead he just nodded once and turned back to his work. Evelyn watched him labor for the next hour. His patience and gentleness with the struggling animal at odds with his usual gruffness. He talked to the cow in low, soothing tones, explaining what he was doing like she could understand, apologizing when he had to cause pain to prevent worse. Finally, with a sound of relief, he managed to turn the calf. Minutes later, it slid free, wet and still and terrifyingly motionless. Cole moved fast, clearing the calf's airways, rubbing it roughly with straw to stimulate breathing. For long seconds, nothing happened. Then the calf gasped, coughed, and drew a shuddering breath. There you go, Cole murmured, still working the small body. That's it. Breathe. The mother cow was already struggling to her feet, instinct overriding exhaustion. Cole moved the calf where she could reach it, and within minutes the newborn was nursing shakily. He sat back on his heels, covered in blood and fluid, and let out a long breath. Good work, Evelyn said quietly. Almost lost them. Another 10 minutes, and... He stopped, shook his head. Doesn't matter. They made it. But she could see it mattered to him. Could see how much these small victories and losses weighed on a man who'd learned young that nothing he did was ever quite good enough. She crouched beside him, put a hand on his shoulder. You saved them both. That counts for something. He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest tight. Does it? Because some days I wonder if I'm just postponing the inevitable. Winter kills, market crashes, disease. There's 100 ways to lose everything you've worked for, and all I can do is try to hold it together one crisis at a time. That's called living, Cole. Nobody gets guarantees. I hate that. The admission was raw. I hate not being able to control outcomes, plan for every possibility, make everything certain. I know. She squeezed his shoulder. But you can't. None of us can. All we can do is show up and do the work and hope it's enough. He was quiet for a long moment, watching the calf nurse. Then, when did you get so wise? Around rejection number 4. That's when I stopped trying to control how other people saw me and started just being who I am regardless. And look where that got you. Married to a man who advertised for a wife like she was equipment. Best decision I ever made. Cole turned to look at her fully, searching her face. You mean that? I do. Even when you're covered in cow placenta and having an existential crisis in a freezing barn at dawn. He laughed, unexpected and genuine. Romantic as ever, Mrs. Maddox. You didn't marry me for romance. No. His expression softened. I married you for this. For showing up. For not flinching. For being exactly who you are even when it's inconvenient. Same reason I married you. They stayed there in the straw-strewn barn, watching new life find its feet, and Evelyn thought about how far they'd come from that first cold transaction, how they'd built something real out of honest need and mutual brokenness. The moment broke when Henderson appeared in the barn doorway. Boss, we've got a problem. Cole was on his feet instantly. What kind of problem? The kind with a badge. Sheriff's here asking questions about property lines and water rights. Says there's been a complaint filed. Cole's face went hard. Who filed it? Garrison. Says you've been running cattle on his land, diverting water from his creek. That's horseshit and he knows it. Those property lines have been established for 30 years. I know that and you know that. But he's got the sheriff's ear and a surveyor willing to testify the markers have been moved. Evelyn watched Cole's jaw clench, saw the controls slip back into place like armor. This was the side of ranch life she was still learning, the politics, the power plays, the constant battles to protect what was yours from men who wanted to take it. I'll handle it. Cole stripped off his soiled coat. Get cleaned up and meet the sheriff. Evelyn, go find the original property deed. Should be in the safe in my office. She nodded and left them to their planning, already mentally cataloging where she'd seen references to property boundaries in the ranch records. The office safe yielded not just the deed, but a stack of correspondence dating back decades. Arguments over water rights, fence lines, grazing boundaries. The history of men fighting over land like it was the only thing that mattered. Maybe it was, out here. Land was life, water was survival, and losing either meant losing everything. She organized the documents by date and relevance, cross-referenced them with the ledgers to show patterns of use, and by the time Cole came to find her 2 hours later, she had a case built that would hold up in any court. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the organized stacks of paper, the timeline she'd sketched out, the notes she'd made about precedent and established use. You did all this? You asked for the deed. I figured context would help. Cole moved to the desk, started reading through her work with growing focus. When he looked up, there was something new in his expression. Not just respect, reliance. This is exactly what I need. How did you... I taught history for 9 years. Research is what I do. She handed him a summary sheet. Garrison's claim hinges on the survey markers being moved, but these letters show your father and his father had the same dispute in 1889. The original survey proved them wrong then. Unless the land physically shifted, the markers are where they've always been. You found this in 2 hours? Your filing system is terrible, but yes. He laughed, shook his head in what looked like wonder. I was going to ride over to Garrison's place and settle this the old way. Probably would have made everything worse. The old way being? Shouting until someone backed down or threw a punch. Much more effective than documented legal proof, Evelyn said dryly. Smart ass, but he said it with affection. Come with me to meet the sheriff. I want you there when I present this. She blinked. Why? This is ranch business. You're my partner. This affects both of us. Besides, he gestured to the documents. You built the case. You should be there when it wins. The word partner settled into her chest with weight she hadn't expected. Not wife, not help. Partner. The meeting with Sheriff Dalton was tense but short. Cole presented the evidence Evelyn had compiled with the kind of controlled intensity that made it clear he wouldn't be backing down. The sheriff reviewed the documents, asked pointed questions that Cole answered with references to specific letters and surveys, and finally closed the folder with a sigh. Garrison's not going to like this. Garrison can take it up with the territorial court if he wants. The law is clear. Cole's voice was steel wrapped in ice. Those property lines stand. What about the water rights? He says you've been diverting flow from the main creek. The creek runs through both properties. We use what we're entitled to under prior appropriation. His cattle have access to the same water they've always had. Cole leaned forward. What he's really angry about is that I wouldn't sell him my northern section last spring. This is retaliation, Sheriff, and we both know it. Dalton shifted uncomfortably. I have to investigate complaints filed, and you have. Now you have documented proof that the complaint is baseless. Close the investigation. The sheriff looked at Evelyn, as if hoping she might be more reasonable. She met his gaze without flinching. The evidence is comprehensive, she said calmly. Mr. Garrison is either mistaken about the property boundaries or deliberately misrepresenting them. Either way, the historical record supports Mr. Maddox's position. Dalton sighed. I'll inform Garrison the complaint won't be pursued, but Cole, watch yourself. He's got friends in the territorial legislature. Man like that can make trouble even when he's wrong. Let him try. After the sheriff left, Cole stood at the window watching him ride away, tension visible in every line of his body. You made an enemy today, Evelyn said quietly. I made that enemy when I refused to sell him land my father broke his back to keep. This was just him testing whether I'd fold under official pressure. He turned to face her. Thank you. For the research, for backing me up, for being there. That's what partners do. Is it? Something vulnerable flickered across his face. I'm not used to having someone stand with me instead of expecting me to handle everything alone. Get used to it. I'm not going anywhere. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms with the kind of fierce possessiveness she was learning meant he felt something too big to put into words. I don't deserve you, he murmured against her hair. We've established that, multiple times. Are you going to keep saying it or accept that I'm here anyway? His laugh rumbled through his chest into hers. Accept it, I guess. Doesn't mean I'll stop thinking it. Fair enough. I still think I don't deserve someone who trusts me with his life's work after knowing me 6 months. 6 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days. Evelyn pulled back to look at him. You're counting? Of course I'm counting. The contract said 3 years. I know exactly how much time we have until... He stopped, remembering. Until nothing. Because we're not doing that anymore. No, we're not. She touched his face, feeling the rough stubble, the tension in his jaw. We're building something that doesn't have an expiration date. Scary as hell. Terrifying, she agreed, but better than the alternative. They stood there in the fading afternoon light, holding each other against the weight of land disputes and uncertain futures, and the terrifying possibility that they might actually be building something that could last. That night, lying in bed with Cole's arm heavy across her waist, Evelyn felt the first flutter of nausea that would change everything. She dismissed it. Too much rich food at dinner, probably. The beef stew had been unusually heavy, but the nausea came back the next morning, and the morning after that. By the end of the week, she couldn't ignore it anymore. The exhaustion that hit her like a wall every afternoon. The way certain smells made her stomach revolt. The tenderness in her breasts that had nothing to do with desire. She knew what it meant. Had known, really, for several days. But saying it out loud would make it real, would shift everything again, would transform their careful partnership into something more complicated. Mrs. Granger noticed first, of course. You're pregnant, the housekeeper said one morning, watching Evelyn turn green at the smell of bacon. I don't know that for certain. I've seen enough pregnant women to know. How long since your last courses? Evelyn did the math and felt her stomach drop. 7 weeks? Maybe 8? Does Cole know? Not yet. I wanted to be sure before. Before what? Girl, you're sure. Your body's sure. The question is whether you're ready to tell him. Was she? Evelyn thought about the contract, about the whole purpose of their arrangement, about how a child was supposed to be the goal. But somewhere along the way, the goal had changed. The child had stopped being the point and started being a consequence of something else entirely. I don't know how he'll react, she admitted. Mrs. Granger snorted. He'll be thrilled and terrified in equal measure, same as any man. But he'll be there. That much I know. How can you be sure? Because I've watched him watch you for 6 months. That man looks at you like you're the only thing keeping his world from flying apart. Baby's just going to cement what's already there. Evelyn wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that this news would bring them closer instead of pulling them back into the clinical arrangement they'd started with. But fear was a funny thing. It lived in the spaces between what you hoped and what you'd learned to expect. She told him that night after dinner in his office where they'd first signed the contract that was supposed to define everything. I need to talk to you about something. Cole looked up from the ledger he was reviewing. Her neat handwriting now filled the pages instead of his hasty scrawl. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think anything's wrong, but something's changed and you should know. He set down his pen, gave her his full attention. You're worrying me. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Cole went very still. You're sure? As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. All the signs are there. He stood slowly, moved around the desk, stopped a few feet away like he wasn't sure he was allowed to come closer. How long? 7, maybe 8 weeks? So it happened. He did the math, and she watched understanding dawn. Around the time of the blizzard, when I stayed. Probably, yes. Cole's expression was unreadable. The contract said 3 years. We were supposed to have time to... He stopped himself. Time to what? Keep pretending this was just business? Evelyn kept her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. We stopped following the contract months ago, Cole. You know that. I know. But this makes it real, permanent. There's no walking away from a child. Is that what you want, to walk away? No. The word came fast, almost desperate. No, that's not what I meant. He ran a hand through his hair, agitated. I'm terrified, Evelyn. I don't know how to be a father. My father was terrible at it, and I'm probably going to be worse. Relief and sympathy hit her in equal measure. You're not your father. How do you know? What if I'm cold and distant and demanding? What if I expect too much and give too little? What if I... She crossed to him, took his face in her hands, forced him to look at her. You saved a calf this week, sat with it for an hour in a freezing barn, talking to it like it mattered, refusing to give up. You treat your ranch hands with respect and fairness. You trusted me with your life's work. You learned to stay through the night even though it scared you. That's not your father, Cole, that's you, and you're going to be fine. You can't know that. Neither can you. So we're going to figure it out together, same as everything else. She held his gaze. I'm scared too. I don't know how to be a mother. Don't know if I'll be any good at it, but I'm here and I'm trying and I'm not going anywhere. That's all we can do. Cole's hands came up to cover hers, pressing them against his face. I wanted this. From the beginning, I wanted an heir. But now that it's real, now that it's not just a contract term but an actual child, our child, I don't know if I'm ready. Nobody's ever ready. We just do it anyway. He pulled her close, held her like she might disappear if he let go. I'm going to mess this up, both of you. I'm going to be too controlling or too distant or too human, Evelyn finished, too flawed and scared and imperfect. Same as me. Same as every parent who's ever tried and failed and tried again. They stood there in his office, holding each other, and Evelyn felt the weight of what they were building. Not just a marriage or a partnership, but a family. Messy and complicated and nothing like either of them had planned. We should get married, Cole said suddenly. I'm really married, public ceremony, witnesses, the whole thing. Evelyn pulled back to look at him. We are married, have been for 6 months. That was a contract signing with a judge and 2 witnesses. He struggled for words. I want people to know this is real, that you're not just some arrangement. I want them to see us choose each other in front of the whole damn territory. Why?
What does it matter what they think?
Because
He stopped, started again. Because I want to stand up in front of everyone and say you're mine and I'm yours and we're building something together.
I want there to be no question, no doubt, no whispers about contracts and transactions. I want them to see what this really is.
Evelyn's throat was tight.
And what is it really? It's love. The word came out rough but certain. I don't know when it happened or how, but somewhere between the contract and now, I fell in love with you, and I want everyone to know it. The tears came before she could stop them. You said love was a liability. It is, but you're worth the risk. He wiped her tears with his thumbs, his own eyes suspiciously bright. So will you marry me again? For real this time? Because we want to, not because we need to?
Yes. The word came out choked but clear. Yes, you stubborn, emotionally constipated rancher. I'll marry you again. He kissed her then, and it tasted like tears and laughter and relief, like two people who'd finally stopped running from what they were building and decided to claim it instead. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, like he was testing the words. I love you, and I'm terrified, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here, and I'm trying, and I'm not going anywhere. I love you too. Evelyn said it back and felt something unlock in her chest. Even though you drive me crazy, and you're terrible at filing, and you think emotions are a strategic weakness. I'm working on that last part. I know, I've noticed. They stood there in the office where they'd signed a contract that was supposed to protect them both from exactly this. Messy feelings and uncertain futures, and the terrifying vulnerability of actually loving someone. Turned out the contract had been wrong about what they needed. What they needed was each other, flawed and difficult and honest. What they needed was to stop protecting themselves and start building something worth protecting instead. The wedding, the real one, happened 3 weeks later in the Silver Creek Church, with half the territory in attendance and Evelyn wearing a dress that Mrs. Granger had altered to accommodate her slowly changing body. Cole stood at the altar in his best suit, looking terrified and determined in equal measure, and when Evelyn walked down the aisle, she saw him mouth the words, I love you, before she'd even reached him. The ceremony was simple but sincere. No contracts this time. Just vows spoken in front of witnesses who actually mattered. Promises made without legal loopholes or escape clauses. When the minister said, you may kiss your bride, Cole did so with a tenderness that made several women in the congregation weep. The reception lasted until midnight, with dancing and drinking and celebration that felt nothing like their first cold ceremony. People congratulated them with genuine warmth, and Evelyn realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being Cole Maddox's contractual arrangement and started being his wife in truth. Late in the evening, Henderson pulled Cole aside. You did good, boss. Real good. I got lucky.
Luck nothing. You recognized what you had and held on instead of letting pride or fear make you stupid. The old foreman grinned. That's not luck, that's wisdom. Cole found Evelyn on the porch, taking a break from the noise, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. Tired? Happy tired. There's a difference. He stood beside her, looking out at the land that was theirs now, in every sense that mattered. I keep thinking about that contract, about how close we came to actually living by those terms. We would have been miserable. Probably. But we would have been safe, protected. No risk of this. He gestured between them. This being? Happiness, partnership, love. All the things that can hurt if they go wrong. Evelyn took his hand. But they haven't gone wrong. We're here. We're building something real. And yes, it's risky and messy and nothing like what either of us planned. But it's ours. It is. Cole squeezed her hand. Ours. No contract required. They stood there together, watching their guests celebrate inside, and Evelyn thought about the journey from that first telegram to this moment. From transaction to partnership to love. It hadn't been smooth, hadn't been easy, certainly hadn't been romantic in any traditional sense, but it had been real, honest, built on mutual respect and careful trust and the willingness to keep showing up even when it was hard. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Come on, Cole said, pulling her toward the door. We should get back before they start betting on when the baby's due. Too late. Henderson started a pool 3 days ago. Cole laughed. The free, genuine sound that still surprised her every time. Of course he did. They went back inside together, to the party celebrating their marriage, to the community that had witnessed their choice, to the future they were building one honest day at a time. And if anyone still remembered the cold contract that had brought Evelyn Hart to Silver Creek Ranch, they had the grace not to mention it. This was something better, something earned. This was love built by two people who'd been broken by different rules, who'd found each other in desperation, and who'd chosen to build something real from that unlikely beginning. And it was more than enough. Spring came to Montana like a promise kept after a long winter of waiting. The snow melted into rushing creeks, the grass turned green almost overnight, and Evelyn's body changed in ways that made the abstract idea of pregnancy into something undeniably real. By April, she couldn't hide the swell of her belly anymore, even under loose dresses. Cole had become aggressively protective in ways that ranged from endearing to infuriating. "You're not lifting that," he said for the third time that morning, watching her reach for a ledger on the top shelf. "It's a book, Cole, not a boulder." "You're 6 months pregnant. Let me get it." "I'm pregnant, not fragile. There's a difference." But she let him get the ledger anyway, because choosing battles was part of partnership, and his hovering came from fear rather than control. The truth was, pregnancy terrified her in ways she hadn't expected. Not the physical changes, those she could manage, but the approaching reality of motherhood, of being responsible for another human life, of potentially failing this child the way she'd been failed by expectations she could never meet. Dr. Morrison came out to the ranch monthly now, checking her health, assuring them both that everything was progressing normally. But normal didn't ease the fear. "What if I'm terrible at this?" she asked Cole one night, lying in bed with his hand resting on her belly. "What if I don't know how to be gentle enough, patient enough, maternal enough?" "Then you'll figure it out, same as everything else you've done." "That's not reassuring. It's honest." He shifted to look at her in the dim light. "You think I'm not terrified? I lie awake wondering if I'll be cold like my father, if I'll mess this kid up before they can even talk, if I'll—" The baby kicked hard enough to interrupt him, a rolling movement visible even through Evelyn's nightgown. Cole's eyes went wide. "Was that—" "Yes, they've been active all evening." She took his hand, pressed it where the movement was strongest. "Feel that?" Another kick, directly against his palm. Cole's expression shifted through wonder and terror before settling on something softer than she'd ever seen from him. "They're real," he said quietly. "I knew that intellectually, but feeling them move makes it impossible to pretend this isn't happening." "Yeah." He kept his hand there, feeling the life they'd created move beneath his touch. "We're going to have a baby, an actual human being who'll depend on us for everything." Terrifying thought. Completely. But he was smiling. "You know what Henderson said today? He said our kid's going to be stubborn as hell because we're both too pig-headed to raise anything else." Evelyn laughed. "He's not wrong." "Probably not. But maybe stubborn's not the worst thing to be. Maybe stubborn's what keeps you going when things get hard." "Is that your way of saying our child will inherit our worst qualities?" "Our best qualities," Cole corrected. "Your intelligence and my determination, your honesty and my loyalty, your courage and my—" He paused. "Actually, what positive qualities do I have besides determination and loyalty?" "You're kind when you think no one's watching. You're patient with things that matter. You work harder than anyone I've ever met. You keep your promises." She touched his face. "And you're learning to love even though it scares you. That's maybe the most important one." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "I do love you, in case I don't say it enough." "You say it plenty, sometimes even with words." He laughed, kissed her, settled back with his hand still on her belly. They lay there in comfortable silence, feeling their child move between them, and Evelyn thought about how far they'd come from two broken people signing a contract to avoid exactly this kind of vulnerability. The fear was still there, but so was something else. Something like hope. 2 weeks later, Garrison made his move. Evelyn was in town for supplies when she heard the commotion outside the general store. Men's voices raised in anger, the kind of tension that preceded violence. She stepped outside to find Cole and Garrison facing each other in the street, a crowd gathering to watch. "You can't prove anything," Garrison was saying, face red with rage. "Those cattle wandered onto your land on their own. 20 head don't wander through 3 miles of fenced property by accident." Cole's voice was dangerously calm. You drove them there deliberately to claim I stole them. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you a thief and a coward. You lost the property dispute, so now you're trying to frame me for rustling. It's pathetic. Garrison's hand moved toward his gun, and Evelyn's heart stopped. Cole, she said his name loud enough to cut through the tension. Don't. He turned slightly, saw her standing there pregnant and pale, and something shifted in his expression. The cold rage tempered into control. Your wife's got sense even if you don't, Garrison sneered. Better listen to her before you do something stupid. The only stupid thing I could do is let you bait me into a fight in front of witnesses. Cole's voice was ice. Sheriff Dalton's already investigating your claim. When he finds those cattle on my northern pasture right where you left them, with your brand still visible under the mud you smeared on them, you'll be the one facing charges. You can't prove... I can prove everything. I've got 3 witnesses who saw your men drive those cattle through the break you cut in my fence. I've got documentation of every head of cattle I own and where they're located. And I've got a pregnant wife who doesn't need the stress of watching her husband shoot an idiot in the middle of town. He stepped closer to Garrison, voice dropping. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to back down. You're going to stop this harassment, and you're going to accept that I'm not selling you my land now or ever. Or I'm going to make it my personal mission to destroy every business deal, every political connection, and every shred of reputation you have in this territory. Your choice. Garrison looked around at the crowd, saw no support in their faces, and deflated slightly. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. Cole turned his back dismissively and walked to Evelyn. You okay? She was shaking but nodded. You could have gotten yourself killed. Not with you watching. I'm reckless, not stupid. He took her arm gently. Let's get you home. They loaded the supplies in tense silence, Cole's jaw tight with residual anger. Once they were on the road back to the ranch, Evelyn finally spoke. You can't keep doing this. Putting yourself in danger over land and pride, and it's not about pride. It's about protecting what's ours. If I back down to Garrison, every landowner in the territory will think they can push me around. And if he shoots you? What then? Her voice cracked. What am I supposed to do with a ranch and a baby and no partner to help me run either? Cole pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to face her fully. He's not going to shoot me. Men like Garrison are bullies. They fold when you stand up to them. You can't know that for certain. No, I can't. But I can't spend my life backing down from threats either. He took her hand. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But if I let fear make me weak, we'll lose everything we've built. Not just the land, our reputation, our standing, our ability to protect our family. Sometimes you have to stand and fight. And sometimes you have to know when fighting isn't worth the cost. They looked at each other, both right and both wrong, trapped in the impossible balance between safety and strength. I can't lose you, Evelyn said finally. Not after everything we've survived to get here. Please don't ask me to be brave about watching you risk your life for property lines. Cole's expression softened. I'm not trying to be reckless. I'm trying to be strong enough that people won't test us. But you're right, there's a line between strength and stupidity. I'll be more careful, I promise. Good. Because our child needs a father, and I need a partner, and neither of those requires you to be a dead hero. Deal. He kissed her hand. No dead heroes. Just live, stubborn ranchers who know when to fight and when to walk away. They drove the rest of the way home in silence, but his hand stayed wrapped around hers, and that was enough. The confrontation with Garrison had consequences that rippled through the following weeks. Sheriff Dalton did investigate and found exactly what Cole said he would. Garrison's cattle deliberately driven onto Maddox's land, brands obscured, a clear attempt at frame-up. Garrison was charged, fined, and publicly humiliated. But humiliation made dangerous men more dangerous. Evelyn started to notice small acts of sabotage. Fence wire cut in remote sections, a watering trough poisoned, killing 2 steers before they caught it. Supply deliveries accidentally sent to wrong addresses, costing them time and money. Nothing provable, nothing that could be traced back definitively, just constant, grinding harassment designed to wear them down. Cole handled it with grim determination, but Evelyn could see the toll it took. He slept less, worked more, carried tension in his shoulders that never quite released. This can't continue, she said one evening, watching him go through the accounts for the 3rd time, looking for discrepancies that might indicate theft. It won't. Eventually, Garrison will either give up or make a mistake big enough that we can prove his involvement. And in the meantime, we just endure?
What else can we do? We can't prove anything. Can't fight an enemy who won't show his face.
Evelyn thought about that. About the kinds of warfare that happened in shadows. The battles fought with paperwork and reputation instead of guns. What if we don't fight him directly? What if we make it unprofitable for him to keep harassing us? Cole looked up. How? Garrison's businesses depend on territorial contracts, right? Transportation, supply, that sort of thing. What if we quietly make it known that anyone who does business with him will find it difficult to do business with us? That's playing dirty. He started it. We're just speaking his language. She pulled out a sheet of paper, started making notes. We've got leverage. Other ranchers respect you. Merchants in town depend on our custom. If we organize a quiet boycott of Garrison's operations, he'll bleed money until he backs off. Cole studied her with something like awe. That's ruthless. That's practical. You want to protect our family? This is how we do it. Not with guns and confrontation, but with the same weapons he's using, economics and influence. You learned this teaching school? I learned this watching men reject me for being too smart. Turns out that intelligence is useful when you stop apologizing for it and start weaponizing it instead. He laughed, pulled her into his lap despite her pregnant belly making it awkward. Remind me never to make you angry. Too late. I'm furious. But I'm channeling it productively. They spent the next week implementing what Evelyn privately called the campaign. Quiet conversations with other ranchers about consolidating supply orders to vendors who weren't affiliated with Garrison. Mentions to merchants that Silver Creek Ranch appreciated loyalty and remembered slights. Strategic partnerships that excluded Garrison from profitable deals. Nothing illegal, nothing even technically unethical. Just business, conducted with precision and purpose. Within a month, Garrison's harassment stopped. Within 2, word reached them that he'd sold out his holdings and moved east, muttering about Montana being too full of stubborn fools to do business with. Henderson delivered the news with a grin. Heard Garrison's gone. Sold everything to a mining company out of Helena. Cole looked at Evelyn, who was ostensibly reviewing supply orders but smiling slightly. Huh. Imagine that. Almost like someone made it unprofitable for him to stay. Henderson's grin widened. Can't imagine who might have orchestrated something like that. Can't imagine, Evelyn agreed blandly. After Henderson left, Cole crossed to where she sat, placed both hands on the desk, and leaned down to kiss her thoroughly. You're terrifying, he said when they broke apart. I'm effective. There's a difference. No, you're terrifying, but in the best possible way. He rested his forehead against hers. Thank you for protecting us without making me compromise who I am. That's what partners do. We cover each other's weaknesses. What weakness did I cover? The tendency to solve everything with direct confrontation. Sometimes subtlety wins battles that strength can't. And sometimes strength is necessary. We're a good team. The best. They stood there in the office where they'd signed a contract meant to keep them safely distant, and Evelyn marveled at how far they'd come. From transaction to partnership to love to this, genuine teamwork built on mutual respect and complementary strengths. It was nothing like what she'd imagined marriage could be. It was better. The baby came in late June, during a thunderstorm that matched the violence of labor with dramatic timing. Evelyn's water broke while she was reviewing accounts, which seemed fitting somehow. One moment she was calculating feed costs, the next she was doubled over with contractions that stole her breath. Mrs. Granger moved with practiced efficiency, sending Henderson for the doctor, getting Evelyn upstairs, barking orders at Cole, who looked pale enough to faint. Don't you dare pass out on me, the housekeeper snapped at him. Your wife needs you functional, not decorating my clean floor. I'm fine, Cole said, but his hand shook as he helped Evelyn to bed. The labor was long, brutal. Nothing like the clinical descriptions in books or the sanitized stories women told each other. It was pain and exhaustion and fear that she might die, that the baby might die, that everything they'd built would end before it properly began. Cole stayed through all of it, despite Dr. Morrison's suggestion that he wait elsewhere. He held Evelyn's hand, let her crush his bones during contractions, wiped sweat from her face, and whispered encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place. Never again. she gasped between contractions. "This was your idea and I hate you."
I know you're doing great. I'm dying. This is dying. You're not dying. You're bringing our child into the world and you're the strongest person I've ever met. Flattery won't save you. Worth a try. 14 hours after it started, with the storm still raging outside and Evelyn convinced she couldn't possibly survive another minute, Dr. Morrison said the words that changed everything. "One more push. I can see the head. One more and you're done." And
Evelyn pushed with everything she had left, and the baby slid free in a rush of fluid and relief. For one terrible moment, there was silence. Then a cry, thin and reedy and absolutely perfect. "It's a girl," Dr. Morrison announced, holding up a tiny, red, squalling creature. "Healthy lungs, all fingers and toes accounted for. Congratulations." The doctor placed the baby on Evelyn's chest, and she looked down at her daughter through tears she didn't remember shedding. The baby was perfect, impossibly small, covered in vernix and blood, still attached by the cord but already furious at the world and expressing that fury with impressive volume. "Hello," Evelyn whispered, touching her daughter's tiny hand with one finger. "Hello, little one." The baby's fingers wrapped around hers with surprising strength, and Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. Not love. Not yet. She was too exhausted for poetry. But something like recognition, like meeting someone she'd somehow always known. She looked up to find Cole staring at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder and terror. "You want to hold her?" she asked. "I don't know how." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." Dr. Morrison cut the cord, cleaned the baby quickly, and wrapped her in a blanket before placing her carefully in Cole's arms. He held her like she was made of glass and might shatter at any moment, his face cycling through emotions too fast to name. "She's so small," he said, voice rough. "She'll grow." "What if I drop her?" "You won't." "What if I—" The baby yawned, a tiny sound that shouldn't have been cute, but absolutely was, and Cole stopped talking entirely. He just stared at his daughter like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Evelyn watched them together, her stubborn, emotionally constipated rancher reduced to speechless wonder by 8 pounds of squalling infant, and felt something settle in her chest. This was her family, messy and imperfect and nothing like any plan. This was what they'd built from a cold contract and mutual brokenness, and the willingness to keep showing up. This was enough. More than enough. This was everything. They named her Catherine Sarah Maddox, Catherine for Cole's mother who died when he was young, Sarah for Evelyn's grandmother who'd been the only person to ever encourage her intelligence. The baby had her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn expression, and within days had the entire household wrapped around her tiny, demanding fingers. Mrs. Granger declared herself honorary grandmother and took over infant care with the same fierce efficiency she brought to everything else. Henderson carved a cradle with his own hands, presenting it with gruff embarrassment. The ranch hands took turns riding by the house just to catch a glimpse of the boss's daughter, leaving awkward gifts of carved toys and braided horsehair bracelets. Cole was useless for the first week, constantly hovering, checking that the baby was breathing, refusing to let anyone else hold her for more than a few minutes. "You're going to exhaust yourself," Evelyn told him, after the 4th night of him pacing with a sleeping baby he refused to put down. "What if she stops breathing?" "She won't. But what if—" "Cole, put our daughter in her cradle and come to bed. You need sleep." "I need to make sure she's safe." Evelyn got up, crossed to him, took the sleeping baby gently, and placed her in the cradle Henderson had made. Catherine didn't even stir. "She's safe. The cradle's right there. You'll hear if she needs anything. Now come to bed before you collapse." He let her lead him to bed, but she could feel the tension in his body, the hypervigilance that wouldn't quite release. "Talk to me," she said quietly. "What's really wrong?" "I don't know how to do this. How to be what she needs. What if I fail her like my father failed me?" "You won't. You can't know that." "Yes, I can." Evelyn turned to face him in the dark. "Because you're already worried about it. Your father never questioned whether he was good enough. He just assumed everyone else was the problem. You're terrified you'll mess this up, which means you'll actually try not to. That's the difference." Cole was quiet for a long time.
She deserves better than a father who doesn't know how to love properly. She deserves exactly the father she has. Stubborn, protective, learning as he goes, but showing up every day and trying his best. That's all any of us can do. Is it enough? It has to be. It's all we've got. He pulled her close, careful of her still healing body, and they lay there listening to their daughter breathe in the cradle beside them. I never thought I'd have this, Cole said quietly. Real family, real partnership, someone who sees me and doesn't run. I never thought I'd have someone who valued me for being difficult instead of despite it. We're quite a pair. The worst, Evelyn agreed. Absolutely terrible at being traditional or proper or any of the things we're supposed to be. And somehow it works. Somehow. They fell asleep holding each other, and when Catherine woke them 2 hours later with hungry cries, they stumbled through the feeding together, Evelyn nursing while Cole fetched clean cloths and water, both of them exhausted and awkward, and learning as they went. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't easy, but it was theirs. Summer passed into fall, and Catherine grew from a squalling newborn into a baby with personality and opinions. She was stubborn like her father, curious like her mother, and absolutely certain that the world existed to serve her needs. The ranch thrived under their partnership. Evelyn managed the business side with increasing confidence while Cole handled operations, and together they built something more successful than either could have alone. They argued, of course. She thought he was too controlling with the hands. He thought she was too generous with credit to struggling suppliers. She wanted to expand. He wanted to consolidate. They fought about child rearing, about money, about whose turn it was to deal with Catherine's 3 a.m. crying. But they fought fair, and they always came back to each other. And the arguments never threatened the foundation they'd built. One evening in October, Evelyn found Cole in his office, staring at the original contract that still hung framed on his wall. "Reading our greatest hits?" she asked, settling into the chair across from him with Catherine on her hip. "Thinking about how close we came to actually following this thing." He gestured at the framed document. "No romance. No emotional expectations. Clean transaction. Would have been easier. Would have been miserable." He looked at her, at their daughter who was trying to eat her own fist with intense concentration. "We would have gotten the heir specified in Clause 3, fulfilled the terms in Clause 7, maintained the emotional boundaries in Clause 12, and we would have been two lonely people sharing a house instead of two partners building a life. Good thing we were both too stubborn to follow the rules. Best thing." He crossed to her, kissed her forehead, then Catherine's. "Though I still think we should burn it. Can't believe you made me keep it." It's a reminder of what we could have settled for if we'd been too scared to want more. Cole sat on the edge of his desk, looking at the two of them, his wife and daughter, his family, his whole world condensed into two people who'd transformed everything he thought he knew about love and partnership and what it meant to be enough. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about legacy, about what we're building here. And I want to make it official, legal. Put the ranch in both our names, set up trust for Catherine, create a real structure that recognizes you're not just my wife but my partner in all of this." Evelyn blinked. "The ranch is already legally mine as your wife. Under territorial law, yes. But I want it explicit. Want documentation that shows you built this as much as I did. Want Catherine to grow up knowing her mother was a rancher, not just a rancher's wife. There's a difference." "Cole, I'm serious. You've transformed this operation. The accounting systems, the supply networks, the way we negotiate deals, that's all you. You deserve recognition for it. And more than that, you deserve security that doesn't depend on me staying alive and married to you." She understood then. This wasn't just about legacy. This was about making sure she'd be protected, even if something happened to him, even if their relationship somehow ended. This was him giving her the same kind of security she'd originally sought from the contract, but freely, from love rather than obligation. "You don't have to do this. I want to. I should have done it months ago." He took her free hand. "You took a chance on a man who advertised for a wife like she was livestock. You could have been trapped in a terrible situation with no way out. Instead, you stayed and you built and you transformed everything. I want that recognized, legally, publicly, permanently." Evelyn felt tears burn behind her eyes. "You know what this means to me, having my name on something permanent, being recognized for my work instead of just my relationship to you." "I know, that's why I'm doing it." He squeezed her hand.
You're not just Cole Maddox's wife. You're Evelyn Maddox, rancher and businesswoman, and the smartest person I know. That should be acknowledged. She set Catherine down in the playpen they'd set up in the corner, then crossed to Cole and kissed him with enough intensity to make him laugh against her mouth. I love you, she said when they broke apart. Even when you're emotionally constipated and terrible at filing and so stubborn, I want to throw things at you. I love you too. Even when you're too honest for comfort and challenge everything I say and reorganize my entire office without asking. We're a disaster. The best disaster. He pulled her close. And we're going to raise an even more stubborn, honest, difficult daughter who'll probably drive us both crazy. As if on cue, Catherine started crying from her playpen. Not hurt, just offended that she'd been put down and demanding immediate attention. They looked at each other and laughed. Your turn, Evelyn said. Pretty sure it's yours. We both know you can't resist her. Cole went to pick up his daughter, who stopped crying immediately and grabbed his nose with surprising strength. Evelyn watched them together and thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate woman answering a cold advertisement to a partnership built on honesty and mutual brokenness to love that neither of them had planned but both had chosen. It wasn't the story she'd imagined as a girl dreaming of romance and being swept away. It was better because it was real, built brick by brick from nothing, earned through showing up and doing the work and choosing each other every single day. The contract on the wall was still there, reminder of the transaction they'd almost settled for. But beside it now hung their real wedding certificate, Catherine's birth record, the partnership documents Cole had drawn up making Evelyn co-owner of Silver Creek Ranch. Evidence of what they'd built when they stopped protecting themselves and started building something worth protecting instead. That winter, when the snow came again and the work slowed, they'd sit by the fire with Catherine between them and tell her stories. Not fairy tales about perfect love and happy endings, but honest stories about how her parents met through an advertisement, signed a contract meant to keep them safely distant, and somehow built a family anyway. Stories about how being too much of what you're not supposed to be can be exactly right for the right person. Stories about how love built on honesty and partnership might not be romantic, but it lasts. Stories about how broken people can build something whole if they're willing to do the work. And Catherine would listen with her father's stubborn expression and her mother's intelligent eyes. And she'd grow up knowing that she came from people who'd chosen truth over comfort, partnership over romance, and real love over safe distance. She'd grow up knowing that being difficult and honest and too much was a strength, not a weakness. She'd grow up at Silver Creek Ranch, learning the land from her father and the books from her mother, understanding that legacy was built by showing up every day and doing the work. And maybe, years from now, she'd find her own version of partnership, her own person who valued her for being exactly who she was instead of punishing her for not being less. But that was future still to be written. For now, Evelyn stood in the office of Silver Creek Ranch with her husband and daughter, looking at the framed contract that represented everything they could have settled for and everything they'd chosen to build instead. No regrets? Cole asked quietly. Not one. You? Only that I wasted 5 months trying to keep you at a distance when I could have been building this from the start. We needed those 5 months. Needed to learn each other, needed to choose this instead of just defaulting to it. Maybe. He kissed her temple. But I'm choosing it now, every day, for the rest of my life. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. And that promise, simple, honest, earned through months of showing up even when it was hard, was worth more than any contract ever could be. Because it was freely given, fiercely meant, and built on the foundation of two people who'd learned that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest, being present, and choosing each other every single day despite the fear and the mess and the uncertainty. That was the legacy they'd build at Silver Creek Ranch. Not just land and cattle and business success, but proof that even the most broken people could build something beautiful if they were brave enough to stop protecting themselves and start building something worth protecting instead. And in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.